It's a film with the most sensational entrance scene in modern film history, and the person doing the entering is entirely still. This is also the least cute meet cute. FBI rookie Clarice Starling is sent to interview notorious incarcerated serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter in his glass cell, to see if he can be intrigued, or persuaded, or teased, into helping the agency track down another psychotic murderer, nicknamed Buffalo Bill, who is still at large. We come upon Lecter, along with Clarice, as he stands ramrod straight with his impassive black stare and thin smile, as still as a reptile in his tight-fitting prison fatigues. It's a measure of the film's horribly potent entertainment value that we take this preposterous situation seriously as a toughly realist, almost procedural thriller, and genuflect to Lecter's fantastically preposterous intellectual attainments, making Woolworth-style pencil sketches of Clarice, cuddling a lamb. With her sharp-faced intensity, Jodie Foster is outstanding as Clarice, the brilliant young operative who once made her mark as a student questioning the Bureau's civil rights record in the Hoover era, it seems, and for her pains got an A- from her buzzard-like boss, Jack Crawford, played by Scott Glenn. Crawford is one of the many older men with an ambiguous, apparently romantic interest in Clarice. These include creepy Dr. Frederick Chilton, played by Anthony Heald as hardly less weird than any of the imprisoned killers under his care, and of course Lecter himself. Anthony Hopkins' performance as Lecter is an uproarious technical masterpiece. All his stage work and accumulated Shakespearean savvy had been leading to this moment. The high-impact close-ups on his face that director Jonathan Demme creates are moments of climactic confrontation, intercut with close-ups on Clarice, and they land like crashes of timpani. His Dr. Lecter whimsically declares that he will help Clarice, but only in exchange for being allowed to psychoanalyze her, listen to her most intimate fears and memories and, what? Exorcise them? Violate them? Then it turns out that Buffalo Bill's most recent prisoner victim, Catherine Brooke Smith, is the daughter of a U.S. Senator, Ruth Martin, Diane Baker, a brilliant narrative contrivance which means that Lecter's expertise is now such that he must be treated as a kind of VIP prisoner and transported to Memphis, facilitating the use of those extraordinary restraints and masks. But how exactly does he reach Chilton's carelessly unguarded pen, extract the inner nib, keep it in his mouth until such time as he can use it to unlock handcuffs, which themselves would appear to have a very serious design flaw? Well, these feats give Lecter an almost supernatural edge on his enemies. For me, the strangest moment is when Senator Martin makes her TV broadcast statement to Buffalo Bill, repeatedly using Catherine's name and using old photos of her as a child, in an attempt to make him see her as a human being. It's a psychologically sophisticated approach that onlookers call smart. And yet the awful, unemphasized point is that it doesn't make the slightest difference. There are no scenes in which Buffalo Bill is shown ignoring her on the TV, or coldly or irritably snapping the TV off. He just never sees this broadcast, and the utter failure of this smart appeal is never remarked on. There is a grisly pessimism in this. After years, The Silence of the Lambs holds up terrifically well. What emerged stronger than ever are Clarice's flashback memories of her cop dad. Like Spielberg's Jaws, this movie evolves the style of Roger Corman, who is given a cameo, although if this was being made today, the writers might be a bit chary of venturing into trans issues with the egregious Buffalo Bill, and the misjudged condescension of Clarice saying that trans people are generally very passive. The bizarre autopsy scene is still horribly unnerving, with the participants putting a powder menthol smudge under their noses to stop the smell freaking them out, and the roll film camera doing its periodic snap and uncanny, keening whine. The movie's soundtrack also carries themes all the way through. There are exhalations and sighs at many points, as when the cocoon of the gypsy moth is taken from the throat of Bill's first victim. Much heavy breathing. There are subterranean rumblings and faraway cries and laments, almost too low to be heard, at critical points. There is the sound of a heart monitor. Howard Shore's mournful music sets a funereal tone. When the soundtrack wants to create terror, as when Clarice is in Bill's basement, it mixes her frightened panting with the sound of Bill's heavy breathing and the screams of the captive girl, and then adds the dog's frenzied barking, which psychologically works at a deeper level than everything else. Then it adds those green goggles so he can see her in the dark. Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins won Oscars for Best Actress and Actor. The movie also won for Best Picture, for Demme's direction and Ted Talley's screenplay, and was nominated for editing and sound. It is remarkable that the Academy would remember, let alone single out, a film released 13 months before the Oscar cast. It usually votes for films that are still in theaters, or new on video. But Silence was so clearly one of a kind that it could not be ignored. Hopkins' performance has much less screen time than Foster's, but made an indelible impression on audiences. His entrance is unforgettable. After Clarice descends those stairs and passes through those doors and gates, which all squeak, the camera shows her POV as she first sees Lecter in his cell. He is so still. Standing erect, at relaxed attention, in his prison jumpsuit, he looks like a waxwork of himself. On her next visit, he is erect, and then very slightly recoils, and then opens his mouth, and I at least was made to think of a cobra. His approach to Lecter's personality, Hopkins says on his commentary track, was inspired by HAL 9000 in 2001. He is a dispassionate, brilliant machine, superb at logic, deficient in emotions. Foster's Clarice is not only an orphan but a disadvantaged backwoods girl who has worked hard to get where she is, and has less self-confidence than she pretends. Noticing the nail polish on one of Bill's victims, she guesses that the girl is from town, a word used only by someone who is not. Her bravest moment may come when she orders the gawking sheriff's deputies out of the room at the funeral home. Listen here now. One key to the film's appeal is that audiences like Hannibal Lecter. That's partly because he likes Starling, and we sense he would not hurt her. It's also because he is helping her search for Buffalo Bill, and save the imprisoned girl. But it may also be because Hopkins, in a still, sly way, brings such wit and style to the character. He may be a cannibal, but as a dinner party guest he would give value for money, if he didn't eat you. He does not bore, he likes to amuse, he has his standards, and he is the smartest person in the movie. He bears comparison, indeed, with such other movie monsters as Nosferatu, Frankenstein, especially in Bride of Frankenstein, King Kong, and Norman Bates. They have two things in common: they behave according to their natures, and they are misunderstood. Nothing that these monsters do is evil in any conventional moral sense, because they lack any moral sense. They are hardwired to do what they do. They have no choice. In the areas where they do have choice, they try to do the right thing. Nosferatu is the exception in that he never has a choice. Kong wants to rescue Fay-Ray, Norman Bates wants to make pleasant chit-chat and do his mother's bidding, and Dr. Lecter helps Clarice because she does not insult his intelligence, and she arouses his affection. All of these qualities might not be enough to assure the longevity of Silence if it were not also truly frightening. Hannibal is not frightening, and for all of its box office success it will have a limited shelf life. Silence is frightening first in the build-up and introduction of Hannibal Lecter. Second in the discovery and extraction of the cocoon in the throat. Third in the scene where the cops await the arrival of the elevator from the upper floors. Fourth in the intercutting between the exteriors of the wrong house in Calumet City and the interiors of the right one in Belvedere, Ohio. Fifth in the extended sequence inside Buffalo Bill's house, where Ted Levine creates a genuinely loathsome psychopath. Notice the timing as Starling sizes him up and reads the situation before she shouts freeze. We are frightened both because of the film's clever manipulation of story and image, and for better reasons we like Clarice, identify with her and fear for her. Just like Lecter,